Hello and welcome to the Progress Report, where we'll be talking to the Honorable Minister of Education, Priya Manik-Chan, about some pressing issues in the education sector. Hello, Minister. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Okay, so Minister, let's jump right into it. Last week, the government would have announced the plans to engage the University of the West Indies. But this has garnered some criticisms in the public eye. Can you explain to us the government's plan to engage UWI?
So, first of all, the government didn't make the announcement, which is perhaps why there is some level of uncertainty and perhaps even suspicion around it. And that's why I think these things can be done a little bit neater. So, what this is we have the University of Ghana, treasured by us, that we believe needs to be enhanced and developed and facilitated in getting better. And that every effort will be made to do that, especially going forward and having online education delivered through the University of Ghana. It's not there as yet. So there has been online teaching to cater for the COVID lockdowns, but delivering fully online courses requires far more than just teaching in front of a camera. You have to have resources online, libraries, tutoring, different things that would constitute an online type university. So we have every intention of helping UG to get to that place and to get to that place quickly. They are not there as yet. So, like I said, the University of Ghana, very treasured by us, something that we expect and intend to make better. We did, however, prior to going to the people and asking for their support and their vote, we had wide consultations across the country in very many different ways. So we had something called a consultation at different places, but we also met with a lot of people who told us that they, as a political party, that what they wanted was the ability to train and educate themselves online, as a result of which the promise to deliver, at least in the first 5 years, 20,000 online learning opportunities and scholarships for those was born and presented to the people of Ghana in our manifesto. Essentially, it was a promise we made. We didn't make that promise in a vacuum. We made it based on what people wanted and said they wanted to us, as we did with all the other promises. So we tried to, we're pursuing now delivering all our promises as quickly as we can. We do have 5 years, but for me, we have to begin everything now. And so we, in pursuit of delivering that promise, we have been speaking to several universities in several countries. Every single ambassador I met in courtesy calls, we have tried to engage with them on how we could enter into partnerships to create some of these opportunities. We have spoken so far to the University of the West Indies, China, India, the University, Indira Gandhi Open University, UK Open, Nigeria, and several other universities about adopting or partnering with them to provide online learning opportunities to people in Guyana, old, young, middle-aged, rural, hinterland, coastal, men, women, boys, girls, everybody. So that's it. It's a conversation that we've had. We are keen on delivering this, and it will happen. Of course, what we have to look at is who is offering which courses that might be relevant to us, that our people want to study, as well as price, because that's going to be an important thing. If you have 2 or 3 universities offering the same course, we will obviously go with the one that is most cost effective to us. So it's still conversations happening. So the criticism I think I saw that you alluded to might have been a misunderstanding by some, that somehow or the other this was going to replace UG. Absolutely not. The University of Ghana was started by Chetty Jagan, the PPP's founder. And at that time it was called Jagan's Night School, and it was scorned, and we developed it over the years and brought it to where it is, and did some good work with it, even as we say, admittedly now, much more needs to be done. So there's no effort to replace anything here. This is in addition to the services we have at UG through our Tech Vox centers, through various post-secondary institutions. This 20,000 learning opportunities that will be sponsored by the government of Guyana, that is in addition to what exists. It's complementing what already exists. It's not replacing anything.
Okay, thank you for that, Minister. But back in 2017 at the CARICA meeting, there were some discussions, similar discussions. How does this arrangement differ from that,
I don't
if it does?
know which 2017 meeting you mean. I wasn't a minister at that time, or the Minister of Education. So I'm not sure what you're talking about. Perhaps you could tell me.
Similar plans to have the University of the West Indies come to Ghana were discussed.
Yeah, but anything, look, APNU had a lot of, frankly, the APNU, AFC had a lot of plans, none of which were realized. So I'm not certain what that plan was. I know there was a promise that a law school would be here and some investor had come in and so on. Of course, you've seen that has not been realized. We are feverishly pursuing the possibility of having an accredited law school in Guyana, not necessarily run by the government of Guyana, but that a law school is based here. So we are looking at very many different options that allow not only our people to train, our Guyanese citizens to train, but also schools that could attract persons from the wider region, Caribbean region as well as Latin America and South America. How could we make our product marketable and beneficial to these countries as even as we earn from it? So there are different models we're looking at right now. That's where it is. The University of the West Indies would be welcome here, but it wouldn't be replacing anybody.
Okay. Minister, you had mentioned that a lot more needs to be done with the University of Ghana. Is there any immediate plans such as getting the university internationally accredited or so?
The university is, the university is recognized.
More programs, sorry.
Of course. So the University of Ghana has done plenty. But even as we say that, I think the University of Guyana will tell you they have plenty more that they can do. We can't close our eyes to the complaints that have been made. People complain about having to wait a long time for grades. People complain about having to wait on answers regarding queries they make. People complain about some of the facilities and condition of the university. So there are efforts to, we can't pretend that the university is more than it is. It has done well, but there's so much more room for improvement. And like I said, it will be supported fully by us to get along in those efforts to improve. One of the things we'd really like to see is UG go online with most of its courses. I mean, fully online, so that persons could register from another country and access the University of Guyana's courses online. There's so much scope for the University of Guyana to be an online university for particular areas. So there will be, we've begun talks. I mean, the University of Guyana has is funded fully by the government, as you know. And yes, so there would be efforts to continue to work with UG. Look, right now UG is talking about its budget. It's talking about its budget with the government of Guyana. UG is talking about expanding their programs. They have to talk to us about that. So there's no them and us. There is a collaborative effort by everyone who is interested and truly interested in seeing the University of Guyana do well, to make sure that we could make it more than it is.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Minister. But before we go any further, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Bishop's High School and the allegations surrounding it. Has this engaged the Ministry's attention?
It has. It has. So it's difficult to ignore how that unfolded. So the Bishop's High School was a very localized issue that arose at and stayed at the Bishop's High School. I know the union made, well, not the union, but the general secretary made comments or whatever, but it was localized to the Bishop's High School. And what it sprung from was, as far as I understand it, students commenting online or persons identifying themselves as students commenting online, different social media platforms, about what they felt was unfair treatment and discriminatory treatment, sexist treatment, even abusive treatment. For me, that is always something we should take seriously and really pay attention to. and it warrants investigation with a view to making sure that if that happened, that we address the needs of those students who might have felt like they were victims of it, and and particularly to make sure it doesn't happen going forward. So it has engaged the ministry, it continues to engage the ministry's attention. We also want to make sure teachers are not on the receiving end of abuse. However, we have to be very careful. Look, freedom of expression has meaning. It is something that has to be cherished and treasured and promoted in this country. And social media platforms allow for beautiful expressions of and manifestations of that right to express oneself. Of course, it can be abused, and often it is abused. But I think we have to be careful with how we deal with these things. You know, I don't know that offense would have been the first emotion that should have been felt, but it has attracted the attention of the Ministry of Education, and we have to remember that at the end of the day, every adult player in the Ministry of Education, including teachers and head teachers and education officers, and so our paramount duty is to look after the best interest of children. And I'm not certain that shutting the school down will ever be in the best interest of children, or at least shutting it down for lengthy periods. I'm happy to say that the teachers are back on the job and they're teaching. I don't think we should trivialize, though, the importance of finding out what went wrong, and particularly with a view to making sure we can address that in a way that ensures that the Bishop's High School is a premier place for children to feel safe at and to learn comfortably at. And that's engaging our attention.
Okay. Thank you for that, Minister. Now, it has been about 2 weeks since school has reopened. What has been the general feedback from regions across the country?
So, we closed because of COVID, like the rest of the world did, in March, and what other countries are calling spring. And we had spoken to a lot of parents in the Ministry of Education. In fact, we gave each parent of 4th, 5th, and 6th form the opportunity to speak to us by having various consultations. Not all came, but thousands did, from across the country, very many different regions from 1 to 10. We also gave that opportunity to teachers. And again, thousands spoke to us. We spoke to the union, we spoke to students, we spoke to CXC, we spoke to the Ministry of Health, and we had wide consultations on what would be best. What we learned during those consultations was that children felt extremely unprepared for any exam that was going to be written next year. They had zero confidence that if they didn't start now, they would be ready for the exam. We learned that teachers were very, very worried that their students would not be ready. So much so that they'd taken it upon themselves to already go back into schools and were teaching. You had entire regions that had all the high schools back in schools, except without permission and supervision and monitoring and so on. And so you almost had a black market return to schools. So when you ban things, if we don't hear what people say about those bans and we don't adjust accordingly, then you could end up with an unlawful, unmonitored, unsupervised return to school, almost like a black marketing, and then there's no control over what happens. So having heard people, we also heard from some people who were uncomfortable with sending their children back and who felt that we should wait. So we thought, given what we were hearing, that we needed to provide options as a state. And so we said that persons can come back into school at the levels of 4th, 5th, and 6th, particularly because we looked at what was happening around the world also. And the Ministry of Health and WHO were specifically saying that if one wears their masks correctly all the time and sanitizes and stays appropriately distanced, that they could be as safe as if they're at home in a lockdown. So we went on a mass public awareness exercise, and then we offered persons the opportunity to come back into school. But we made it very clear that parents had a choice and students had a choice. You didn't have to come. You could if you wanted to, but you didn't have to come. We also provided masks and face shields and sanitizing agents and vitamin support for all our teachers, all our students. We have seen between a 6 to 7 to 70% attendance turnout, which says to you that the majority of persons have chosen to come back out, which means that's what they wanted, which is what we heard when we were talking to them. The 30% that have not come out is causing us worry. If it is that persons have chosen to stay home, that's fine. We will support that because that is an option. But we have been checking individually with the children who did not come out, and we have we've learned that unfortunately some of them have already gone to start working and they're in the labor force already. Now we have to immediately craft a plan to make sure there's a trajectory to help these students do more than just get absorbed in the labor force, that they are engaged, that they can develop and acquire skills that are certified, that they could be ready for the boom that Guyana is going to have. We don't want when these children are 40 years old that they're hampered when they have their own children and wife or husband and bills to pay, that they're hampered by something that happened 25 years ago in 2020 called COVID. COVID is not going to have the same horrific effect 20 years from now. So we have to make sure what's happening now doesn't dog us long into the future. And so we're in a really aggressive attempt happening right now across the ministry in regions across the country in trying to determine who the children are that have not come back out, not to force persons who exercise the option to stay home to come out back. Those children we will support as far as we can by having them learn at home, but more to find out if there are persons who have left the system that we can't, that will do nothing else were we not to intervene. Okay. Nothing else educationally and academically, that is.
What about the safety measures in the schools particularly? How has that been going?
So, we're dealing with a little bit, the children are a little bit older. They're between the ages of 15 to 17, 18. And we have teachers and the numbers are limited. So although we've said come back out to school, we've left the door wide open for schools to determine how that was going to work. Some schools are blending. They're doing all the theory online, and then they're doing practical in the classroom or in the labs. Some schools are bringing in different levels at different times. So all of fourth form or grade 10 will come in on these days, and all of grade 11 will come in on these days. Or all the science students will come on this hour, and all the maths business students. So schools are doing different things, and that's working. How safe it is. COVID, we are certain from all the information that we have about it, that if we do not wear our masks, and if we gather unnecessarily, and if we don't wash our hands and stay hygienic, that we are going to get spread. And so I never want to sound at all like I'm in a boastful place where we say, oh, nobody has caught this, we did the right thing, we're fine, we're on the right track. Because in a moment, that could change. Mm-hmm. And so I'm very conscious of that. So we have not let up on the information campaign and the permanent education campaign. We're trying to work with PTAs. And we have a lot of PTAs active in the schools actually trying to do monitoring. So although the kids are older, we're trying to monitor, hey, put on your mask, don't gather up there. We have the task force engaging, which is comprising the police and the army as members, along with other people, looking at bus parks and so to make sure children don't gather up in the afternoons. Just trying to make sure people don't relax measures, because sometimes doing normal things like going back to school could make you feel like everything is normal again. And so we have to keep everybody on their toes and remind people 100 times that we're not in normal times still, and this is still a disease that could spread, a virus that you can catch, and it could be fatal. And I don't think we should mince words and dress it up. It is that bad.
You mentioned the bus parks. How has that been going in terms of ensuring children aren't loitering on bus parks?
So that, like I said, we've had good support from the task force, trying to make sure that doesn't happen. And as far as we know, we haven't had any complaints about excessive loitering or gathering up or delays in joining your transportation to go home. I don't think I'd feel comfortable sitting here and saying we know for certain that no child has gone within 6 feet of the other child. That probably not be sensible for me to say that. I am hoping desperately that children, especially the children, students who have come out, that they understand the importance of wearing their masks and following the guidelines. I have visited several schools, I mean dozens, and I've seen a consciousness, and I've actually spoken to students, you know, they're older, a consciousness that they have to um, take the precautions alongside, very closely, a deep worry that if they did not come back into schools, they would not be ready. And so the students who have chosen to come out obviously are children who have made a choice, have decided that this is what they want to do to be able to prepare for next year. So I think, you know, they're a little bit more conscious about what needs to happen.
Okay. So can we ask for a general update on the voucher distribution? I know you would have started that not last
Uniform
week.
vouchers.
Yeah, the week
Yes.
before.
So you know, the school uniform, school supplies vouchers started under the Jack Dale presidency. That was President Jack Dale responding to people telling him that you have all these fancy schools and you've trained teachers and so on, but we still find it difficult to outfit our children. And so the uniform, that's how come it got dubbed the uniform voucher. It was initially intended, if when it started, for on a basis, means basis. Children or from families who were most needy were given it through the Ministry of Human Services, and then that, like everything else under the PPPC administrations, grew to become for every student, and it went to the Ministry of Education. And so now every student in the public sector, public school system, is entitled to a voucher for uniform or school supplies, anything related to school. And it's raised from $2,000 to $4,000 now. The budget was recently passed, vouchers were printed, and so we're distributing across regions right now. Most regions have already distributed most of their vouchers. So different regions set their distribution for different dates. And again, because people are trying to comply with the COVID guidelines, different levels are coming in at different times. But it's going to be more than $700 million in the system, in the hands of parents across this country as an assistance to help them get their students ready. I've seen persons say, if school's not open now, why give the voucher now? Because we're planning. I mean, you don't wait until school is ready, is about to be open. Pencils will be needed whether we open next year, next week, or 5 months from now. So we're just trying to help out a little bit. And it's really, I'm very pleased because I see how, you know, these figures sound like small amounts to you, but it's really very helpful. It goes a far way to parents and for families, and I've seen that. I've seen how mothers and fathers have turned out to receive this voucher, and I know it means a lot to them. So it gives us really, really great pleasure to be able to bring it.
Minister, you said that you guys are planning, and I know I spoke to Minister Anthony earlier today, and he would have indicated that, you know, Guyana will be getting some of the vaccines through the COVAX facility. Given that there will be a vaccine anytime, would school be open anytime soon?
The vaccine. So we don't have a vaccine now, and we are open for levels 4th, 5th, and 6th, or 10, 11, and 12. I'm not certain when we would get the vaccine. I've had my own conversation with the Minister of Health, and he has been, you know, working day and night trying to make facilities available to us. The vaccine is not only unavailable to Guyana, but to the world right now. The vaccine would help, and the vaccine would make us all feel a little bit safer, because we would actually be safer once it's administered and taken correctly and so on. Whether we wait until a vaccine is there to open out the levels would be something we determine based on how this reopening has gone and what other advice we have from the Ministry of Health. Look, we have a very real concern. All the research in the world has indicated very strongly that the longer we stay out of school, the more we'll suffer from severe learning loss, as well as the likelihood of dropouts. And research is very clear. For every year more that children stay in school, they'll earn 9% more. So we really have a real um, motivation to make sure our children finish as many levels as they can. We already have complaints of students forgetting to write and forgetting work that they had done. That is the learning loss we're talking about. And you got to be careful. So if we don't get a vaccine till June of next year or September of next year, then what? Do we stay out of school for all that time? If necessary, we will. Whether it is necessary, it's going to be something we keep reviewing all the time. So these are still decisions that we haven't made as yet. As soon as we make them, you will know, and we won't make them without talking and talking and talking to people. The stakeholders, parents and students and teachers and the health ministry and other countries looking to see what they have done and so on.
Okay. Minister, I know that grades 10 to 12 would have been reopened for students to prepare for the CSEC exams. But Guyana has the National Grade 6 Assessment, and I know you would have mentioned that you guys are relooking at that. Do you have any update for us on it?
We're still looking. The grade 6 exam, which is a little bit different from the CSEC exams. The grade 6 exam is our exam. We write it, we set it. CXC sets the paper for us, but we mark it, we can determine what goes into the paper and so on. What we do with the exam would be determined more and driven more by when we come out. If we start school in January and we could write it in August, then that would be 9 months, and you could probably do the full curriculum that that we had intended to do. If we start later, then we might have to do. So there are very many different things we could do. We could test up to a certain level. We could do only a paper one. We could do the whole thing. We could not write the exam at all. Please, I said that, and a couple someone's interpreted me to be saying we won't be writing the exam. I'm not saying that. I'm saying we have not decided as yet. What I am saying is that we can do a range of things from not writing the exam at all to writing the exam as we know it, and a whole set of things in the middle of that. Writing only parts of it, writing up to a certain level, being tested up to a certain level and so on. The NGSA is a placement exam. It's not an exam to determine who's bright and who's dunce. It's an exam to determine which secondary school students will go to. And if there are other fair ways of assessing that, then those are things we'll look at too. No decision has been taken as yet about it. I would encourage parents and students and teachers to continue preparing for the exam. Because we shouldn't work towards an exam anyway. It should be learning these things so that we can move on to the next level of learning, which would be grade 7. So I'd encourage everyone to continue preparing for the exams.
Okay. So, Minister,
finishing the syllabus rather than preparing for the exams.
So, Minister, before we go, what are some of the plans your ministry has for 2021?
Many. So we have spent a lot of time looking after making the schools ready, getting back into school, and we've been consumed almost only by that. But we have some very big plans that we had made, not in a vacuum and not by ourselves, but again based on what people said their problems were and what they thought solutions would be when we were campaigning for their vote. And having made those promises and having been voted into office, those votes, the majority of the people of this country have said they wanted us to, said when they voted, by their vote, that they want us to implement the programs that we had promised. And so we have to get cracking on that. Much of the work has already started. So for example, we'd promised an upgrade and expansion of the Learning Channel. That has begun. We are presently trying to determine what would help us to expand our studios to allow for 6 channels. And we're in the process of attempting to procure equipment and space and the satellites and so on to be able to do that. Textbooks, parents had said to us, you keep giving us a list every year. The schools give us a book list and it's really costly and it really bends us up financially and we need some help. So we're in the process of determining what textbooks would be best, because that's the problem. School in Berbice uses one textbook for math and another one in Region 3 uses another one. So how do we buy universally for everybody? We're in the process of determining what are the best books, and we don't do that by ourselves. We're talking to all the teachers at level 5 or level 6. What are your best texts? Tell me which one you prefer and why, and then have a review about what we want to buy centrally, and then everybody uses that. So trying to do the textbook procurement, well, determine what is needed. We've already started the uniform voucher program, and we've raised the amount that is given on it. We have recommitted to beginning again the cash grant program, the Because We Care cash grant program that rolls out next year at $15,000 per child, and it's going to grow until it becomes $50,000 per child. So many of these things we've already started looking at, but it's just been just over 100 days, so a lot of it you won't see as yet rolled out as a full program, simply because we haven't reached that point. But we've begun to look at how we could deliver on the promises we made.
Okay. What are some of the changes that would have been made in your ministry within the first 100 days of you being there?
Changes. We've brought back on people who were fired by the AP and UAFC, which is what I find extremely ironic. The crocodile tears right now about people who are being relieved of their posts. There were professionals in the Ministry of Education who were unceremoniously removed from where they were, either sent to other places that were effectively demotions, or sent off the job completely, which is why the ministry was haywire and not functioning the way it should have been functioning. So we've rehired many of those persons, and we're back on track. I feel safer, more comfortable with how things are flowing. So that's sounds like a small thing to you, but it actually puts a lot of structure in the ministry. We are creating some new positions. So there's going to be a Deputy Chief Education Officer for Ambernian and Hinterland Education Development. We're calling it a head, DCO ahead, because we have a perpetual gap existing between the delivery of services and education and the consequences of that between what happens on the coast and what is delivered in the hinterland. And we are absolutely certain that all the children in the hinterland, Ambernian villages and communities can perform as well, and can be, based on those good performances, have all kinds of opportunities and doors open to them if we focused in a strategic way. So we can't keep talking about this gap and how we're going to work for it. We have to strategically work to bridge that gap, and so we've created that position that's going to be filled by an Amerindian actually, named Marty D'Souza from Region 1. He has an enormous amount of experience in not only working in hinterland and Amerindian communities, but also meeting challenges head on and finding solutions, very impressive solutions to those challenges. And I expect to see him do that across the country, fully with the support of the PPPC government and myself and the rest of the ministry, to make sure that we, not in a 10-year period, plug these gaps, but very rapidly address some of the needs that can be addressed immediately, so that we could even up and put on more equal footing the children of the hinterland. Because we see, and it was very pronounced this year, if you noticed, there were severe complaints about CXC and how our students were adversely affected by various markings and structures of the exam. And what became very evident to us is that we needed a body to pull together what we were doing in the ministry. So examinations are a huge part of how we measure and evaluate how effective our work has been. And in many cases, it's the only way we can measure, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. That has to change too. Output. So we have created an Assistant Chief Education Officer for exams. And that person is going to be expected to pull together the curriculum with the setting of the exam and the marking of the exam and the administration of the exam, and then analyzing or causing to be analyzed the data that comes out of those exams, so that we could use it to drive development. So that's just, again, sounds like a small thing, but it will change the way we develop and use data that we have to change what we're doing. We hired, so that's on the front of hiring. Mm-hmm. The ministry will have a 5-year strategic plan. We've gone without a published one for the last 5 years. But it wasn't published, so the world didn't know it existed. those are some of the major, along with, of course, working with the Guyana Teachers Union to try to develop teachers and help in making them the professionals we think we would get the best results out of as a country, as a nation. And also working with those teachers to make sure their conditions and um, remuneration and so on is satisfactory. The stakeholders across, I'd like to see all secondary schools become board schools. So there are just many different things that we're looking at doing. The post-secondary institutions, I mentioned the University of Guyana, looking at how we could develop UG better, looking at how UG can serve the needs of more of our students. You know, every year you have large numbers of students in particular courses who get turned away, not because they're not qualified, just because we have limited seats. How do we change that? How do we attract more foreigners to study at UG? Some of those things that we have to look at, and just CPC needs to be fully online. That's not something we can delay any longer. I had given a date of December 31st, but that's not going to happen because going online requires far more than has happened so far. But that needs an aggressive injection of will and energy to go online fully, so that the college is delivering online education. We have teachers, you know, I met teachers in places like Kaikan and Parima that are passionate about teaching, that have chosen this as a profession, not because they can't do anything else, just because they want to teach. But they can't access training there. And that is just, it's the most saddening thing ever. Simply because we haven't advanced to that place. But we can and we have to.
Okay. Thank you so much for that, Minister, and thank you for your time today. This has been the Progress Report, where we spoke to the Honorable Minister of Education, Priya Manikchan, about some pressing issues in the education sector.